All right, so get ready, because today we're going deep into one of those cases that just sends chills down your spine.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about Charles Starkweather and Caril Fugate teen sweethearts in the 1950s who turned into cold-blooded killers.
Wow.
It was a time when America was already kind of freaking out about the whole rebellious youth thing,
Right.
and this case just like threw gasoline on that fire.
Yeah, it really exploded all those anxieties about teenagers gone wild, but like taken to a horrifying extreme.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to try to unpack today.
For sure.
We've got some excerpts from a true crime podcast and a couple of really in-depth Wikipedia articles about them.
Okay, cool.
And our mission here isn't just to rehash the facts.
Right.
We want to understand the why.
Yeah, the why is always the most interesting part. Like, what drove these kids to do what they did?
Yeah, what dark forces were at play here? And how did their case become this huge cultural touchstone?
Right. It's a story that still fascinates people even today.
Totally. So to even begin to answer those questions, we need to start with Charles Starkweather himself.
Yeah, he's the starting point for sure.
He was born in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1938. Seems like a pretty normal beginning, right?
Yeah, typical working class family, a few siblings, but, there were cracks in that seemingly normal facade.
From what I've read, it sounds like he had a really rough upbringing.
It was.
His dad had rheumatoid arthritis, which meant unstable employment, lots of pressure on his mom to make ends meet.
Yeah, tough situation all around.
And apparently the family dynamic was pretty volatile.
Yeah, lots of arguments, even violence sometimes.
Starkweather often said he was bullied at school because of a physical condition that affected his legs.
Right. Some sources dispute that, though.
Right. But either way, school definitely wasn't a safe haven for him.
Except maybe in PE, he excelled there. Probably found a sense of power and control that he lacked in other areas of his life.
It's almost like those early experiences planted the seeds of resentment and rage in him.
It's a common theme in these kinds of cases, unfortunately.
He went from being supposedly a well-behaved kid to someone his own family started to fear.
Wow.
One of his friends even said there was this chilling darkness in him, this cruelty that would come out whenever he felt threatened or envious.
So unsettling to think about those early signs.
Totally. And this is where psychology offers some really interesting insights.
Right.
Think about it. Poverty, an unstable home life, potential bullying, all these things contribute to a feeling of powerlessness, like you're trapped and the world's against you.
Absolutely.
And in Starkweather's case, it seems like that fostered a really deep rage.
It makes sense.
And then you add in his strong sense of class envy, which comes out in his writings from prison.
Oh, wow.
And you've got like a recipe for disaster.
It's a dangerous combination for sure.
And then there's that quote of his that's just bone-chilling. Dead people are all on the same level.
Ugh. Yeah, that one's hard to stomach.
It gives you a glimpse into his worldview, nihilistic, like he'd lost all empathy, all sense of the value of human life. It's like violence became this twisted equalizer in his mind.
Yeah, he saw it as the only way to level the playing field.
But was it just rage that fueled him?
Well, we have to factor in the cultural context. Remember, this was the 1950s, the James Dean era. That brooding, rebellious figure.
Oh, right.
He captured the anxieties and frustrations of a whole generation.
And Starkweather was obsessed with him.
Yeah, completely.
So is it possible he saw himself as a kind of James Dean figure? A misunderstood rebel striking back at a world that had wronged him?
It's a compelling theory for sure. The identification with Dean, the simmering rage, the need for control, all of those could have combined to create something really dangerous inside him.
A powder keg just waiting to explode.
Exactly. And all of this before he even met Caril Fugate.
Right. Their relationship and her role in all this is one of the most debated parts of this whole story.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, she was only 13 when they met, which adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It does. Their relationship had a huge power imbalance. Right from the start. He was 18, a high school dropout, already prone to violence.
And she's just a young teenager, probably looking for love and security.
Yeah, it makes you question how much agency she really had in all of this.
And as we dig deeper into their story, we're going to see just how tragic and destructive that dynamic became.
This is where things get really dark.
Yeah, buckle up.
Yeah.
It's almost like their relationship was this powder keg, just waiting for a spark.
Yeah.
And that spark, as far as I can tell, came in late 1957 during a fight with a gas station attendant named Robert Colvert.
Right.
And it all started over something so trivial, buying a stuffed animal on credit.
A stuffed animal?
Yeah, can you believe that?
That's crazy.
It seems absurd, right? A stuffed animal triggering such a violent act.
It does.
But that's the thing about Starkweather. His pride was so easily wounded, and that rage was always simmering just below the
Yeah,
surface.
like a volcano ready to erupt.
Exactly. He couldn't let go of this perceived insult, this rejection of his credit.
And so he went back to the gas station multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times, each time buying some small item, almost like he was trying to prove some kind of point.
Oh, wow.
I'm guessing this doesn't end well.
I have a bad feeling about this.
It doesn't. He eventually goes back with the shotgun, forces Colfort to hand over $100.
Oh, no.
Then he drives Colfort to a secluded area and shoots him.
That's cold-blooded.
It is a calculated act of violence, a chilling display of Starkweather's need for control and his willingness to use extreme measures to get what he wants.
So this was his first kill.
His first kill, and sadly, it's just the beginning of a horrific descent into darkness.
It's hard to even imagine what goes through someone's mind at a moment like that.
I know, and this is where Caril and Fugate enters the picture in the most tragic way imaginable.
Gosh, this is where it gets really complicated.
Yeah, January 21st, 1958, Starkweather shows up at Fugate's home, and her parents, Velda and Marion Bartlett, they tell him to leave to stay away from their daughter.
And how does he react?
He shoots them both.
Oh my God. And then, horrifyingly, he clubs their 2-year-old daughter Betty Jean to death.
That's just pure evil.
It's hard to even fathom that level of brutality a 2-year-old child.
It's beyond comprehension.
It makes you question what kind of darkness can reside in a human being.
I know, and this is where the narratives start to diverge.
How so?
Starkweather claims that Caril was there during the murders, a willing participant, even trigger-happy, as he put it.
Trigger-happy. But she was just a kid.
I know, but Caril tells a completely different story.
What does she say happened?
She said she came home to find her family being held hostage by Starkweather, and he forced her to go with him under threat of more violence.
So we have two conflicting stories. He paints her as an accomplice while she claims to be a terrified hostage.
It's the central question of the whole case: who do we believe?
It's impossible to know for sure what happened in that house.
Right.
But we have to consider the context. Caril was just 14 years old.
A child thrown into this unimaginable nightmare.
I can't even imagine the psychological pressure she must have been under, the threat of violence, the possibility of Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, it's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone a teenager.
Could we reasonably expect a 14-year-old to think clearly and make rational decisions in that situation?
It's a really good point, and even if we entertain the idea that she did have chances to escape, would it be fair to judge a child in that situation by the same standards as an adult?
I don't know. It's tough.
And the justice system wasn't exactly lenient with her.
No, they weren't.
Caril was convicted as an accomplice and sentenced to life in prison.
Wow.
A lot of people believe her punishment was way too harsh given her age and the potential for coercion.
That's definitely a conversation worth having.
It is.
But regardless of where you stand on Caril's culpability, what follows is a terrifying 6-day killing spree across Nebraska and Wyoming.
Yeah, that's what really captured the public's
It
imagination.
wasn't just the number of victims, it was the seemingly random nature of the killings.
It was like he was playing a twisted game.
They start in isolated areas, then escalate to targeting wealthy families, almost like Starkweather was trying to make some kind of statement.
A statement against society.
Maybe it's a pattern that's both terrifying and perplexing.
Definitely.
First, they kill a family friend, August Meyer.
Oh, wow.
Then they target this young couple who offer them a ride, Robert Jensen and Caril King.
And what happened there?
Their accounts differ again. Starkweather admits to killing Jensen, but says Fugate shot King.
So more conflicting stories.
Oh.
What happened next?
They arrive in Lincoln and invade the home of C. Lauer Ward, a prominent industrialist.
Yeah.
They kill the maid, Lillian Finkel, wait for the Wards to return home, and then kill them too.
It just keeps escalating.
The violence is relentless, and with each murder, the media frenzy intensifies, turning this case into a national obsession.
It's like a real-life horror movie unfolding in the American heartland.
Exactly. And this is where the case starts to tap into something deeper within the American psyche.
What do you mean?
Remember, this is the 1950s, a time marked by the Cold War, the fear of nuclear annihilation, and this emerging youth culture that was challenging traditional values.
Yeah.
Starkweather and Fugate became almost symbolic figures, embodying all these anxieties about juvenile delinquency and societal breakdown.
Like the poster children for everything people were afraid of.
And the media coverage only amplified those fears, turning them into folk devils. the personification of a nation teetering on the edge of chaos.
It's a classic example of a moral panic.
Right, and it's important to remember the media landscape at the time.
Yeah, pre-internet.
This was before widespread television, so people got their news from newspapers and radio, which often sensationalized the story, creating this almost mythical aura around the case.
Wow, it's crazy how much power the media had back then.
It really is. It's a reminder of how much media can shape our perceptions and contribute to these kinds of moral panics.
Absolutely.
But thankfully, this reign of terror couldn't last forever. It all comes to a dramatic end during a high-speed car chase.
Oh.
It ends with Starkweather's capture in Wyoming.
Did he go down without a fight?
Well, here's an interesting detail. Caril is the one who runs to the police, yelling, "It's Starkweather, he's gonna kill me."
So she turned on him.
It's a pivotal moment that's open to interpretation. Did she finally see a way out? Was she genuinely terrified for her life?
Or was it a calculated move to shift the blame onto Starkweather?
We may never know for sure.
It's just another layer of complexity in this already complicated story.
Exactly. It makes you think about the nature of truth memory
Yeah.
and how narratives can be manipulated, especially in high-profile cases like this.
It's a reminder that we can never really know the full story.
And maybe that's part of why this case continues to fascinate us even decades later.
Perhaps.
It's a story that forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society we live in,
About the darkness that exists within all of us.
and the ways in which that darkness can manifest in truly horrifying ways.
It's a sobering thought, for sure. It's kind of crazy their paths after they're captured go in such different directions.
Yeah, right. Their outcomes in the justice system were totally different.
Yeah, Starkweather was extradited back to Nebraska, and he faced trial.
Okay.
But here's the thing. He was only charged and sentenced for one murder, the murder of Robert Jensen.
Really? Even though he was linked to 10 other deaths?
Yeah, but just the one.
That's wild. It's like the court back then didn't even care about understanding the full scope of his crimes or why he committed those other murders.
Yeah, it definitely shows a different era in criminal justice.
No kidding. So what happened to him?
He was executed in the electric chair in 1959 at the age of 20.
Wow. A quick and brutal end.
Yeah, very different from what Caril Fugate faced.
So what happened to her? She spent a lot of time in prison, right?
She did. She was convicted as an accomplice to first-degree murder and got a life sentence.
A life sentence.
But she ended up serving 17 years before her sentence was commuted, and she was paroled in 1976.
17 years is a long time, especially considering she was so young when all of this happened. Did the court ever consider her age or the possibility of coercion when they sentenced her?
It's hard to know for sure.
Do you think justice was served in both cases?
It's tough to say that, the legal system back then didn't have the same understanding of things like Stockholm Syndrome or how trauma affects a developing brain.
Right, that makes sense.
Some people believe that Caril was a victim herself, manipulated and forced by this older, violent guy.
Yeah, and others are still convinced that she was a willing participant.
It's one of those cases where you can see both sides of the argument.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how complicated guilt can be, especially when you're dealing with young people who are caught up in these extreme situations.
Yeah, it's not always black and white.
So what happened to Caril after she was released? Did she ever try to rebuild her life, get out from under the shadow of this case?
From what I've read, she kept a pretty low profile after getting out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she worked various jobs, got married, and even lost her husband in a car accident back in 2013.
Wow, that's awful.
It sounds like she was just trying to find a normal life, try to leave the past behind.
It's almost like she lived two completely separate lives. First, the teenage girl caught in this whirlwind of violence, and then the woman just wanting anonymity and a chance at peace.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I wonder, did the memories of that time ever come back to haunt her?
It seems like they did. In 2020, she applied for a full pardon, hoping to finally clear her name.
Did she get it?
No, it was denied.
That's heartbreaking.
It is, but it shows that she still wanted to rewrite the narrative to reclaim her story.
Wow, it's just another layer of tragedy in a story that's already so full of it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to how powerful this case is, the questions that remain unanswered, even after all these years.
And it's not just the legal and psychological aspects that keep people fascinated, right? The Starkweather Fugate case had a huge impact on pop culture, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Almost as soon as it happened, it became this source of morbid fascination, inspiring books, films, songs, even a comic book series.
Like Badlands, the classic film by Terrence Malick.
Right. And Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone, even Bruce Springsteen's song Nebraska.
It's crazy how many creative works were influenced by this case.
It makes you wonder, why are we so drawn to these stories of violence and rebellion, especially when young people are involved? Is it just morbid curiosity, or is there something deeper going on?
I don't think it's just about rubbernecking at a car crash, you know.
Yeah, there has to be more to it than that.
I think the Starkweather Fugate case touches on some really fundamental questions about good and evil innocence, lost the fragility of the American dream.
Oh, I can see that.
It forces us to confront the potential for violence that exists within all of us, even in seemingly ordinary lives.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
And then there's that question that hangs over the entire case. Was Charles Starkweather born bad, or was he a product of his environment?
Yeah. Did his rough childhood, the poverty, the bullying, did all of that create the monster he became?
Or was there something dark inside him from the very beginning?
That's the heart of the nature versus nurture debate.
A debate that's still going on today in psychology, sociology, criminology.
The Starkweather Fugate case is a really powerful and disturbing example of that debate. It makes us think about how individual predisposition and social influences interact to shape who we become.
And it's a question without any easy answers.
Yeah, definitely not.
What's clear, though, is that the Starkweather Fugate case continues to fascinate and disturb us because it forces us to grapple with some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about the potential for darkness that we all carry within us.
It's a story that chills us to the bone, but also leaves us with a lot to think about.
So on that note, we come to the end of our deep dive into this dark chapter of American history. As always, we encourage you to check out the sources we talked about, dig deeper into this complex case, and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, it's a story that stays with you long after you hear it.
And maybe by exploring it, we can gain a little more understanding of the forces that shape us, both the good and the bad.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Thanks for joining me on this journey. It's been quite a ride.
It has. Thanks for having me.